Good morning, everybody. Here we have Celeste Austin. She's a community activist here in Sonoma County. She's outspoken on several issues, including homelessness, women's rights, voter suppression towards Black and brown people, and racism in America. In 2019, she spoke at the Women's March in Santa Rosa and tore the house down. She is an alumni of Sonoma State University and holds a master's in social work degree from San Francisco State. She has a deep love for justice and fairness to all people. Next, we have Adrienne Lauby. She's a homeless activist who works for Homeless Action and SAVES. She is a disabled feminist with a deep connection to working with working class and poor people. She has been honored for her homelessness work by the Sonoma County Peace and Justice Center and the local task force for the homelessness. Please give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out this morning. I talked to someone who said that she'd already come to classes early, but for me, this is kind of early. This morning, I opened up my Nextdoor, and there was this subject matter line that said, desperate, $1,000 for a room, need help now. And I am sure I'm not telling you anything you all don't know. That still is shocking to me that someone is desperate to pay $1,000 for a room in the house. This is not a sustainable way to house people. And it is the main reason we have homelessness in Sonoma County. Sonoma County, you might not know, but it has one of the highest percentages of homeless people in California, which has one of the highest percentages of homeless people in the United States. We are, of course, one of the richest counties in California and one of the richest counties in the United States. And still, every night, we have 2,000 homeless people sleeping without safety and without shelter. We have another 1,000 people who are in some kind of shelter, transitional houses, and the two major shelters in Sonoma County, which are the Mary Isaacs Center in Petaluma and the Sam Jones Center in Santa Rosa. They live in rooms with bunk beds, basically. We call it large congregate housing. It's noisy and it's not conducive to getting anything done in your life except kind of making it through the day. And that's true, really, for most homeless people, that making it through your day consumes all of your energy. So while I'm talking about Nextdoor, I should say that on my Nextdoor, I live in Kitati. And we have, the county just bought a little housing area. It's got like 3 little 2-bedroom houses in it. And they're gonna use it for some homeless people. And my Nextdoor just blew up. And all the haters were there. And I would say the biggest theme of the haters was, why don't they just get a job? Why don't they just get a job? Or, I had to work hard. They made bad choices. They should live with the consequences. And to some extent, that's true. Some people did make bad choices. Some people could do more than they do. But for most people, that's not true, because most people become homeless because of things that are mostly out of their control. And the way I think about it is there's usually two traumas. Okay. So one might be a childhood trauma. Maybe you never quite got out of foster care, or you had some mental health problems as a kid. You had a dysfunctional family in various ways. But even if you make it through your childhood without a trauma, then you get into your adulthood, you might lose a job. Okay, a lot of people lose jobs. They call on their family and their friends and they work it out and they get another job eventually. But if you lose a job, and then like my friend Charlene, she lost her job because she was having so much stress on the job that she couldn't really keep it up. And after she lost the job, she had a mental breakdown. So her family and friendship network, which was pretty solid, dissipated because of the first trauma. And the second trauma, when she had her mental breakdown, it was really stressful. And a lot of people tried to help her, but were not really able to do very much. She became homeless. And what she said then to me was, I became invisible. Because although she was a Black woman and she had not been a wealthy woman, she felt like she was visible to her community. But as a homeless person, all the stigma and stereotypes just fell across her face. And it's taken her some time to put herself back on a path. But she's good. She's in an apartment now. I work with two organizations, Sonoma County Homeless Action, which is a volunteer group. And we meet every Monday morning at the First United Methodist Church in Santa Rosa from 9:30 to 11. We have about 10 to 20 people, lately about 20 people who come every Monday. And we exchange information. Just, what happened this week? What did the government do? What have you heard from this shelter or that person? What rumors are going around? And then, because our name is Action, Homeless Action, we try to figure out action we can take. And we have 3 or 4 demands, which we've had for 5 or 6 years now that we've been in organization. There's a whole, there's a flyer back there if you want to read them. But they're basically saying people who are homeless should have dignity and shelter. They shouldn't be sleeping under the bush. That's just unconscionable in a wealthy county. Even in a non-wealthy county, it's unconscionable. There should be legalized encampments or transitional villages. In other words, if our county and our government doesn't want to provide housing for people, the least they should do is give them a sheltered place where they can be left alone. Because what happens now is when you're homeless, you try to find a place to hide, and eventually some neighbor calls the police, and the police come and they tell you to move along. Sometimes they issue you a citation and you get all involved in this criminal justice. But even if they don't tell you that, you're always being pushed here, pushed there. Nothing ever feels safe, which, that contributes to all kinds of sleep deprivation. We believe that people should have legal protection, just the same as any other person. They shouldn't be able to have their property taken or thrown away, which happens a lot. The police come, they say, oh, look at this. Well, here's your ID. You can keep that. All the rest of this is trash. And, to people in homes, sometimes it looks like trash, but that's their property and it should be protected. And finally, we believe that people should have the ability to use the bathroom. And this seems, I tell you, this was brought up originally in my world by a nurse who said this is unhygienic. This is a public health concern that people are not having a place to go to the bathroom. And I thought, well, yeah, everybody should have a bathroom. But it is actually really core that you can spend a lot of your day looking for a bathroom. And more, the stores have customers only. And if you're homeless, you're not going to have that money to, one, you're not going to look nice enough a lot of times to get into that store and feel okay. But then you don't have the money for the $5 cup of coffee or whatever. So, and we've had a heck of a time. We have put porta potties out where there are encampments, and the Parks and Rec Department calls the company and has them taken away. We have in the downtown Santa Rosa, they just revamped their square and made this lovely square for all kinds of events. They deliberately did not put in a public bathroom because they thought it would, quote, attract homeless people. So now, almost every weekend they have an event there. They bring in the porta potties, which, let's see. I wanted to tell you the cause of homelessness. There's multiple causes, and if you do a little research, you'll find that even in Sonoma County, there's multiple reasons why people become homeless, why they say, what sent you to homelessness? Well, it was loss of job, loss of getting kicked out of my parents' house. It's a bunch of things. But ultimately, I believe it's the lack of housing. And I blame one person, and that's Ronald Reagan. And I blame him not because he closed the mental health institutions and didn't provide community housing, which he had promised to do. That was actually a big problem, and it did send a lot of people on the streets. But the biggest thing he did was cut the HUD funds, the HUD funds. HUD used to build housing for poor people. They just did. And he cut those funds by 50%. Those funds have never gotten back, even when we've had Democrats in charge. So that means for all those decades, we haven't been building housing for poor people. And that means that low-income landlords are able to charge market rates, and the rates go up and up and up. What else do I want to say? I want to say that so the other organization I'm part of is called SAVES, Sonoma Applied Village Services. And it's a 501c3 because, as often happens when you're in an activist group, you go and you go, you know, we need this, we need this, we need this. Why don't you do this, do this? And they don't do it. And so you say, okay, we have to do it ourselves. And that requires a whole nonprofit structure. So we did do that. And our goal is to set up tiny home villages for homeless people. And these are places where people will have a little room with a lock, a window, a bed, a safe place to keep their property, and then some common areas that have porta potties and kitchen kind of facilities. The county, not that they've given us any credit for it, but the county had an emergency with the Joe Rodota Trail Camp. Maybe you heard about this, big old camp. And they got a lot of pressure from neighbors, do something, do something. So they set up a tiny home village up at Los Guilicos, which used to be a juvenile justice facility. And there's now 60 people out there, kind of out by Oakmont, so far away. But they're living in these little rooms, not quite as cute as the ones we had in mind, but they're adequate. And when they first got proposed, a lot of people I knew said, no one's going to want to live in these. These aren't nice enough. They're really just a glorified shed. You can't put people in sheds. But of course, there is a huge waiting list of people who are going, kind of like that person I saw next door this morning. Help me. I've got $1,000. Well, they don't have $1,000, most of them, but I need something better than what I have now. So that's our solution, and we're working toward it. We're also, the other solutions that we see, and I guess I should back up a little bit, like the obvious solution is to build housing. You know, if we could put up a whole bunch of small developments of single, studio apartments, a lot of people would have housing right away. And that costs a lot of money, about $500,000 per apartment. So nobody, even the people in the city and county government who say this is the solution, they don't know how to get that money because it's a lot of money for them. So what happens is we trick away at it. We go, okay, this year we built something for 30 people. Next year we'll build something for 45 people. But the constants of about 3,000 people who are homeless stays constant. So we need some interim solutions. And one is the tiny home village solution. One is share housing, which is to put people into bedrooms that are empty. And there are a lot of retired people here, and some of them have 1 and 2 bedrooms. I've heard there are as many as 60,000 bedrooms in Sonoma County that are not used. And there's barriers. It's just like getting a roommate. You just don't want to say, okay, whatever, right? You have to have interviews. You have to have some backup if things don't work out. But that's being explored pretty thoroughly. And the last one is JDUs and ADUs. And those are, the county and the city have both changed their regulations. So people can build a little apartment in their backyard, or they can take a piece of their house and section it off and make it, this is your apartment here, your little area. And so they've changed the regulations on all that to make it cheaper and less perfection. There's a lot of county codes that come into play when you build stuff, but they've relaxed a lot of that so that people can get into housing, which is good. The other thing I want to mention, well, there's a couple things. Okay. Homeless Action and a few homeless people sued the county and the city. And this comes really out of what happens at our meetings all the time. It's like, how can they do that? Oh, this happened to you last night. How can they do that? How do they get away with that? Why don't we have an attorney? Let's take them to court. And after a lot of years, some attorneys showed up and said, we would like to help you take this to court. There was a big encampment behind the dollar store in Santa Rosa. They were ready to just scatter all of those people, no place for them to go. So we went to the federal judge and said, this is against people's civil rights. People have a right to stay in public land if there is nowhere else for them to go. And there was a landmark decision called Boise, which is called the Boise decision, where some homeless people sued the city of Boise for basically pushing them around. And the judge said yes. So we went into court on that basis. And the judge was not really convinced by our arguments. The judge said, well, look, they say they have 1,000 places for people to go. Here's less than 1,000 people. If they aren't in these places, it's probably because they don't want to go. They're probably, outlaws, or they like being outside. They're, those kind of camper type people. So it's not the county's fault that they don't have a place to go. And we said the county's lying. The county did not have that many places available. So what came of all that was after a year and a half, and well, one thing that came of it is I learned that suing people is really hard. It takes a lot of work. The judge said, okay, I don't know what's right or wrong here exactly. I'm going to give you a preliminary injunction. And we're going to put some rules out, and we'll see how it goes. And so that's this sheet of paper I gave most of you, which says in Santa Rosa, not in the whole county, but in Santa Rosa, if they try to move a homeless person along, one, they have to bring out an outreach worker. So it's not a policeman that's talking to you. And the outreach worker has to offer you some kind of shelter. And the thing that actually is landmark about this, that's pretty much what Boise said. Also that you have to preserve their property for 90 days. And we added this part about disability because as we were interviewing people for the lawsuit, we were really surprised to find out how many people were disabled, like tons, maybe 60, 80%. And some of it is mental disability, which most people associate with homelessness, but amazingly number of physical disabilities as well, living with cancer. I mean, that's the one that was shocking to me, 4th stage cancer, homeless. So the judge added that to our injunction that they had to assess people for disability. And then, once you're disabled, you need different things. And that's been really powerful, particularly for people who have PTSD, which a lot of homeless people do because being homeless itself is kind of, it is traumatic. So if you have PTSD, we have people who would say, okay, I'll go into the shelter, but it's not going to work for me. And the shelter workers would go, no, it's fine. Look, we're giving you 3 meals a day, and look, it's going to be okay. And they get in the shelter, and something happens. 2 meals a day. Oh, 2 meals a day, pardon me. and something happens. There's a loud noise, or someone walks by their bed and bangs the side of their bed, or they meet someone they've known and been afraid of. And all of a sudden, the PTSD trauma flips up. And they don't succeed. They get thrown out of the shelter back onto the street because they can't live in the shelter. What else do I want to say? I handed you out, I think most of you got it anyway, this piece of paper that's the true and false 10 statements. So if you want to think about more about homeless people, it's a good place to get some ideas. And I think I'm ready to turn over to you.
Good morning. Thanks. Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, I'm really happy. Adrienne and I are happy that and pleased that you've come out today to be a part of Social Justice Week. And I want to just give Sonoma State a shout out for doing Social Justice Week each year. we've been up here, I've been here about 3 different times, and I've talked about the same thing, but with different flavors and different information. I too work in the homeless, I don't want to say the homeless arena of trying to support people as they move through housing. It's something I've been doing for many, many, many years. I've worked for nonprofits more than 25 years. So I've worked with battered women. I've worked with runaway and homeless teens. I've worked with all sorts of individuals, such as what Adrienne talked about. I've worked with veterans now. I've worked with people who are being released from county jail. I've worked with just a variety of folks who find themselves without a home. You know, I am respectful of using the term homeless because some people don't want to be identified as being homeless. You know, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of stigma, there's a lot of prejudices against people who are unhoused. So I use that term in talking about people who don't have a place to live at this point in time. I personally believe that everybody deserves a spot, a place to have themselves and their stuff somewhere in this country, somewhere in this world. And as Adrienne was talking about with the encampment, and how many people have heard about the Joe Rodota Trail? Lots of folks, not only people here in Sonoma County, but all over California, because it really brought a lot of attention to people who were living outside, people who needed a place to go, and some people who chose in some way to be there because, you know, you oftentimes want to be around people that are like you, people who are your friends, people you've been on the streets with for a period of time. And some homeless people, many of them have created community, right? And community is really important. And so to be gathering somewhere with people who you kind of know and who support you, and sometimes there's conflict out there. But encampments are something that will continue to happen in Sonoma County because basically what we're doing is we're moving people from one encampment to another. And individuals will try to find a place where they can be. You know, the Joe Rodota Trail actually came out of the encampment that was over at the Dollar Tree, which had been there for a long time, actually. And that encampment had grown out of another encampment that was called Heroin Hill or Needle Hill. And so people came from different encampments and joined the encampment out at the Dollar Tree. And in a way it kind of worked, and in a way it didn't. But then it became a health hazard, you know, not having the resources, not having the will to try to maintain some kind of sanitation in these places, not having what you need to do it. And the bottom line is, why do people have to live like that? Why are people living like that? Some of them, as a social worker, as a case manager, I put some of that responsibility on individuals too, but it's a systemic problem. As Adrienne has talked about, in this county, Sonoma County, a county that has a lot of resources, we should not have people living outside. Now, just more recently, how many people read the Press Democrat? How about online? Newspapers aren't happening. Well, I just have to make a point that the PD does a really good job of keeping us up to date on what's happening in this county when it comes to homelessness. And so if you are interested in getting more up to date what's happening now, Press Democrat has really been very committed to bringing us that information. For example, how many people have heard about the homeless count? Ooh, a couple. Great. And the homeless count was just done last Friday. Now you may go, the homeless count, what is that? It's when groups of people who are trained, some of them are formerly homeless people, who go out in the community and go to encampments and go to safe parking, go to the different shelters and make an effort, and you got to hear me on this, make an effort to count the number of unhoused people we have in Sonoma County. And in doing that count, you have to use the HUD definition of who is homeless. Because you may think that people who are couch surfing, how many people know someone who's ever couch surfed? I would think so, yes. Couch surfing isn't necessarily counted in being homeless. And it's certainly not stable housing, because wherever you're staying, that could end. So the goal is to try to get some idea of the number of homeless people in our county. And Adrienne put out some statistics, because we also believe that the stats are not correct. So you get stats from the homeless count, 2,500, 2,300. It's gone down, it's gone up. But when you get out there and you talk to people and you do some of the interviews that Homeless Action and others did, you find that it's much larger than that. But what happens is, from that count, from that number, the state, the county, the feds give Sonoma County money to provide programs and services for individuals who are unhoused. So it has some value. Trying to count homeless people is not an easy task to do. And so you have to look for markers, you have to look for cars, you have to look for tents, things like that. But we come up with some number that has some significance. The other thing that Sonoma County is doing that was in the PD is they brought in the FEMA trailers. Woohoo! So because, as Adrienne has mentioned, and as far as we know, when agencies or programs want to start housing programs in the neighborhood, in their neighborhoods, what happens? Adrienne alluded to it. You have something called not in my backyard. We don't want those people in our neighborhood. We don't want you having a program in our neighborhood. And it gets pretty rough. The most recent temporary housing that's out at Los Guilacos that came out of the Joe Rodota Trail, the people out at Oakmont and the people in that neighborhood were saying, oh, we don't think that's so good. I talked with people from the county who are out there beating the streets, looking for space, looking for housing, looking for places they could buy, because the Board of Supervisor, because we were in an emergency situation, decided to give additional money to try to make a difference. And so, you know, it's a difficult process trying to find housing, finding places that programs can actually have programs set up, which is one of the things we have to look at. People who are unhoused, they could be your cousins. They could be your sister. They could be someone that you've grown up with. They can be people like Adrienne has said, individuals who have an array of reasons why they're unhoused. For older individuals who are homeless, and I worked at the Living Room for 11 plus years, which is a drop-in center for homeless women and children, or women who are fragilely housed, which is another term. Fragilely housed means you're barely hanging in there. You're hoping your landlord doesn't raise the rent. You're hoping your landlord does not sell the property. You're hoping that your job will pay you a living wage or pay you so you can afford the high rent in Sonoma County. So in working with women and senior women, That's one of the higher populations of homeless people, seniors. Another population of homeless individuals are the TAY youth. Those are transitional age youth, or youth who've aged out of the foster care system. See, what we've learned is that a lot of the homeless people who are out on the street came out of the foster care system because they did not have the support that many of us have had through our family, through parents. Their family systems had already broken down. So when they turned 18 and had to go out and live on their own, they weren't making it. So there are programs now to help take youth and youth coming out of the foster care system, which is very good. You have the Dream Center with SAY. A new program was just started through SAY and a collaborative Sanctuary Village for youth 18 to 24. So the good news is that there is some new housing, new programming, and programming designed for specific populations. I really wanted to give a shout out to Kobe Bryant. And not just because he's Kobe Bryant, but because Kobe Bryant and his wife, Vanessa, have been doing some work in the Los Angeles area to help homeless individuals. Now, Kobe's favorite charity or nonprofit was the Make-A-Wish Foundation. But in Los Angeles, he and his wife give money and support to an organization called My Friend's Place. It reminds me a little bit of the Living Room, but it is a resource center for young people 12 years old to 25. And they do a variety of services, food, clothing, basic essentials, assistance in finding housing. And so when you ask yourself, why do individuals choose different charities or different nonprofits and stuff like that? I believe that because Kobe and his wife have teens and have children, and they are just great parents, that they wanted to help an organization that was working with youth. Just 2 days ago, a friend of mine called me from the East Bay, and she was very excited because a young woman, a young girl who was in her after-school program out in East Oakland. You know, we know out in East Oakland, not being stereotypical, that there is some real hardships out there. And she was excited because this young lady who had been going to the after-school program, who she had been helping, she was given $30,000 from the Curry Foundation so she could go to Spelman College. People are contributing. People are doing things to help prevent homelessness, because one of the things we know about homelessness is that it's easier to help someone prevent being unhoused than it can be trying to help people get housing once they become homeless. Does that kind of make sense? So we want to continue to support programs that help people stay in their housing or not become homeless. As I said, I now work for a program called Interfaith Shelter Network. I no longer work at the Living Room, the drop-in center. So I'm really working with a program that really spends most of their expertise time in providing housing for people who are unhoused or in transition. They work with people who are newly released from prison. Now that's another population. Moving out of the criminal justice system. They're working with parents who are being challenged as parents, and so they're partnering with other county organizations such as CPS to help with housing and case management. We also have something that's kind of a not so popular term these days, transitional housing. Housing for people to stay in while they move into and look to prepare themselves to move into more permanent housing. I want to share a quick story with you that from working at the living room in Santa Rosa for 11 plus years and seeing a lot of folks who were newly homeless. We used to say people would come into our program, and it was like deer in the headlights. Like, what happened? Like, you know, what do I do? Where do I go? Adrienne mentioned just some of the basic necessities that people would just have to do, like use the bathroom, find a bathroom, you know, find water. So I had heard that one of the participants was looking for me and wanted to talk to me, and I still have a good relationship with the living room, and I still care about that program, and I care about the women who are there. And so this woman who had been homeless for quite a while, she and her daughter, her 23-year-old daughter, had lived up at a couple of the encampments, the one called Needle Hill or Homeless Hill, Heroin Hill. You get the theme here. They had lived up there for quite some time, several months, sometimes a year or so. And unfortunately, this woman had wanted me to call her because her daughter died. Her 23-year-old daughter passed away. Because see, living outside, being homeless, dealing with domestic violence, not having the resources you need, not having the food, not having medical care or using and accessing medical care, you know, your lifespan decreases. And she was just heart-stricken. She was heartbroken. This is a mother who was just in a lot of pain. She didn't really know how she was going to bury her daughter, but I have a feeling and know that there'll be some support out there. The good news is that the mother is now housed. And she says, Celeste, I'm housed. I've been in a program. I've been in a house, a room in a housing program for 1 year. Yeah, it's really affirming. So she is in a place called Stony Point Commons, and it's for individuals who have some mental health problems. And it provides case management, it provides a community, and each of the individuals living at Stony Point Commons, each of them get a room. So it's a 16-bed facility or housing program. It is called permanent supportive housing, which is really cool. They get to live there. And, you know, one of the things that was really helping her through this difficult time, she had housing. If you get an opportunity, look up Housing First. It's one of the models that Sonoma County is using. We laugh about it sometimes. Housing First, okay. We're working hard at trying to get people inside, and some of it is working, but because of our fires, right, and because of other things, it's hard because you get people housed and other people become unhoused. So I want to really encourage students and all of us not to give up, not to become apathetic, not to blame homeless people for their situation. It's a complex issue, and it is not just on their backs to find and create housing. We as a county, we as a nation, you know, we as providers have to continue to work toward helping people, supporting people to live inside. I believe that housing is a human right. I believe it's only fair and just that people are able to live inside and have some kind of housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Celeste. So I know you have to leave to get to classes, but are there questions or things you want to know about? All right. Excellent.
I'm wondering if you or any of the programs in the county thought more about single room housing, where it's like lots of beds, one big space, that kind of thing. I know that Los Angeles County is trying to do something similar down there. Their problem, their problem that discussed?
So his question is have people here locally thought about more like barracks housing where there's a big room and a lot of spaces for people to sleep? I would say that's that's the model that they use for the shelters. And it's kind of losing some favor, I think, in most people are realizing that it's a really hard place to live, especially if you're coming right off the street. And so we're looking for something that's a little more specific for individual needs. But, you know, there's also a lot of outcry, like, let's open the fairgrounds and get people inside. Let's just get them inside. And then we'll sort out where they can go and what could happen from there.
You know, we have used that model before here in Sonoma County. The Armory was used for many, many years. That's how Interfaith Shelter Network transitioned from doing sheltering at night at the Armory for several years into doing transitional housing. So it worked in some ways, you know, because the Armory is a pretty large facility, but we did have to share that space with the National Guard. And the National Guard was not thrilled that we were there, but because of a state mandate that we needed to do something, we were in a state of emergency. The Armory was reopened about 2 or 3 years ago, a couple of years ago. So, you know, you look around and you see space, you see empty buildings, you see, you know, facilities. And so it's a great idea. We need to continue to be creative and use some of the structures that we already have.
Yeah, go ahead. So one of the things SAVES does is we do the dinner preparation for Los Guilicos. So every night we feed 60 people, and maybe you could do that once a month. There might be some other things if you want to talk to me or come to one of our homeless action meetings. We could think about it.
SAVES would be it. Go ahead.
With what? No, I'm not even familiar with it. Are you?
Great. You know, the living room program does provide a lot of service opportunities for students and have worked with Sonoma State doing a variety of things. So that would be another possibility. Just nonprofits, that's how nonprofits are able to sustain themselves, is through volunteerism and through students and seniors and churches and other service agencies who want to come and help out. So I'd be happy to talk to you as well.
Anybody else? Thank you. Thanks for everybody for coming. I just want to echo what Celeste said. Don't give up. Don't think it's too big of a problem. We can actually make a difference in a very short time. Thanks.